Blood and espresso look surprisingly similar when they pool together on white Italian marble. If you had told 24-year-old Selena Jenkins that her life would depend on a perfectly timed, clumsy moment, she would have called you crazy. She was just a waitress at Manhattan's most exclusive underground lounge, suffocating under a mountain of debt. But as the clock struck midnight, she found herself holding a tray of poisoned coffee, walking toward Gabriel Samuel, a ruthless underworld billionaire known to the streets as the Sheikh for his vast desert oil empire and untouchable power. In the next 10 seconds, Selena had to make a choice. Let a king die or risk her own life by pretending to trip. To the outside world, L'Étoile was just a high-end private members club nestled discreetly in the heart of Tribeca. There was no sign above the heavy oak doors, only a polished brass plaque bearing a single star. But to the people who mattered, the politicians, the hedge fund titans, and the shadow brokers of New York's criminal underworld, it was neutral ground. It was a place where empires were built and destroyed over crystal glasses of Macallan, 1926. Selena Jenkins hated every square inch of it. She wasn't there by choice. 3 years ago, her father, a gambling addict with a misplaced sense of optimism, had borrowed $250,000 from the Moretti crime family. When his heart gave out during a particularly brutal winter, the debt didn't die with him. It transferred to his only daughter. Victor Moretti, the current head of the family, was a man who preferred his ledgers balanced. He didn't break Selena's legs. Instead, he put her to work at L'Étoile, a club he secretly owned. She was an indentured servant in a crisp white blouse and a tailored black pencil skirt, smiling through the exhaustion, serving the very monsters who held her life hostage. Selena was practically invisible to the elite patrons, and that was exactly how she liked it. Being invisible meant she was safe. It also meant she heard things. On a suffocatingly humid Tuesday night in late October, the atmosphere inside the club was electric. The air was thick with the scent of Tom Ford cologne, expensive Cuban cigars, and raw, unadulterated tension. Victor Moretti was holding court in the VIP alcove, a semi-private booth draped in heavy velvet curtains. He was a terrifyingly calm man with silver hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of dirty ice. Selena was tasked with restocking the liquor cabinet behind the secondary bar, which shared a thin, acoustic-paneled wall with Victor's alcove. The panels muffled sound, but earlier that evening, a frustrated busboy had slammed a heavy keg against the wall, dislodging one of the wooden vents. Through that tiny gap, voices carried with chilling clarity. "He arrives at exactly 11:30, Victor's voice floated through the vent, smooth and devoid of emotion. "Samuel is bringing his usual detail, 4 men, heavily armed, but they won't expect it here. This is supposed to be neutral." Selena froze, a bottle of Grey Goose suspended in her hand. Samuel, everyone in the underworld knew the name Gabriel Samuel. They called him the Sheikh. Born to a ruthless American arms dealer and a disinherited European aristocrat, Gabriel had built a multi-billion-dollar empire in the Middle East before bringing his operations back to the States. He controlled shipping ports, oil refineries, and a vast network of illicit trade. He was a ghost, a myth, a man who commanded absolute loyalty and struck fear into the hearts of veteran mobsters. Victor Moretti had been trying to negotiate a partnership with Gabriel for months to save his own dwindling territory. "Are the exits secured?" Another voice, Dante, Victor's brutal right-hand man. "My guys are on the back doors. The front valet is ours for the night," Victor replied. "When Samuel sits down, the waitress will bring the espresso. The girl, Selena. She doesn't know anything, so her heart rate will be steady. She won't look suspicious. The moment he drinks, the aconite will stop his heart in 3 minutes. It will look like a massive coronary. By the time his security detail realizes what's happening, my men will step in to assist. We take out the bodyguards in the confusion. Samuel's empire splinters by morning, and we take the docks." Selena's blood ran cold. The bottle of vodka slipped from her numb fingers, miraculously landing softly on a stack of bar towels. She backed away from the wall, her chest heaving, her breath caught in her throat. They were going to use her. They had spiked the proprietary espresso blend reserved for high-stakes sit-downs. If Gabriel Samuel died after drinking from a cup she handed him, His organization would tear New York apart, looking for revenge. Even if Victor protected her, which he wouldn't, she would be the prime suspect. Victor would probably put a bullet in her head the moment the chaos subsided, tying up the only loose end. She looked at the antique grandfather clock near the entrance. It was 11:15 p.m. Panic threatened to claw its way out of her throat. She could run. She could slip out the back doors right now and disappear into the subway. But Dante's men were on the exits. She wouldn't make it past the alleyway. She was trapped in a gilded cage, holding a ticking bomb. If she warned Gabriel, Victor would kill her on the spot. If she did nothing, Gabriel would die, and Victor would kill her later. She needed a third option. She needed a miracle. Selena walked mechanically toward the barista station. Her hands were shaking violently. She grabbed a heavy ceramic espresso cup, placing it on a silver tray. Next to it, she placed a pristine white paper napkin. She dug into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small black pen she used for taking orders. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely uncap it. On the underside of the thick, absorbent napkin, she wrote quickly, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. Poison in cup. Exits blocked by Victor's men. Valet is compromised. Do not react. She stared at the words, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She folded the napkin precisely, hiding the writing, and placed the espresso cup directly on top of it. Now all she had to do was deliver it to the most dangerous man in the Western Hemisphere without getting them both killed. At precisely 11:30 p.m., the heavy oak doors of L'Étoile swung open. The ambient chatter in the room didn't stop, but it noticeably dropped an octave. It was the kind of silence that follows a predator stepping into a clearing. Gabriel Samuel walked in. He was an imposing figure, standing at 6'3", dressed in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that clung to his broad shoulders. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who owned the ground he walked on. His face was all sharp angles and shadowed intensity. A strong jawline, a straight nose, and eyes so dark they looked like endless, starless night. He wasn't just wealthy, he radiated a quiet, terrifying authority. Flanking him were 4 men in equally sharp suits, their eyes scanning the room with cold, professional efficiency. The head of his security, a massive man named Carter, stayed within an inch of Gabriel's right shoulder. Victor Moretti stood up from his VIP alcove, spreading his arms in a welcoming, deceitful gesture. "Gabriel," Victor called out, his voice dripping with false warmth. "My friend. Welcome. Sit, please." Gabriel didn't smile. He buttoned his suit jacket and slid into the leather booth opposite Victor. His bodyguards immediately took up defensive perimeters around the table. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Victor." Gabriel's voice was a low, resonant baritone that carried easily across the room. "I have 30 minutes. You said you had a revised proposal for the East Coast shipping lanes. I'm listening." From the barista station, Selena watched them. Dante approached her, his face a mask of cruel anticipation. He handed her a small silver tray carrying the single cup of espresso she had prepared next to a crystal glass of sparkling water. "Take it to them," Dante hissed, grabbing her upper arm tight enough to bruise. "And smile, sweetheart. Don't make a mess of this." Selena nodded mutely. She picked up the tray. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every step toward the VIP alcove was agonizing. The heels of her shoes clicked against the marble floor, sounding like a death march in her ears. She focused on Gabriel's broad back, then on Victor's icy, expectant gaze. Victor was watching her intently, waiting for the poison to be delivered. She was 5 feet away, 4 feet. Gabriel was speaking, his eyes locked on Victor. "Your margins are too wide, Victor. You're bleeding money on the bribes alone. If I integrate your routes into my network, I take 60%, and you clean up your payroll." "60 is steep, Gabriel," Victor replied smoothly, his eyes flicking to Selena as she approached. "But perhaps we can come to an arrangement over a drink." Selena stepped up to the table. This was it, the moment of no return. If she just handed him the cup, he would drink it. Victor would win. If she dropped the tray right now, Victor's men would open fire, and a bloodbath would ensue. She needed Gabriel to look at the napkin. She needed him to focus entirely on her for just a split second. Selena took a deep breath. She stepped forward to place the glass of water on the table. As she pulled her hand back, she deliberately hooked the toe of her left stiletto behind her right ankle. It was a violent, ungraceful stumble. Selina pitched forward, the silver tray tipped. The ceramic cup flew off, spinning through the air. Splash! The scalding hot espresso hit Gabriel Samuel dead center on the lapel of his immaculate $3,000 suit, splashing up onto his crisp white collar. The heavy ceramic cup shattered against the marble floor with a deafening crash. The reaction was instantaneous. Carter and the three bodyguards had their hands inside their jackets in less than a second, eyes darting around the room. Victor jumped back, feigning shock, while Dante cursed loudly. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Victor roared, pointing a trembling finger at Selina. Selina dropped to her knees, gasping in fabricated terror, though the tears springing to her eyes were entirely real. "I'm so sorry. Oh my God, sir, I am so sorry. I tripped. The floor was slick." Gabriel Samuel had not flinched. He hadn't jumped up. He simply looked down at the dark brown stain ruining his suit, his jaw clenching. He radiated a terrifying, contained fury. Slowly, he shifted his dark, penetrating gaze to Selina, who was kneeling at his feet, desperately dabbing at his suit with a towel she had pulled from her apron. "Get away from him, you stupid girl," Dante barked, stepping forward to grab her. But before Dante could reach her, Selina looked up directly into Gabriel's eyes. In that split second, the facade of a terrified, clumsy waitress vanished. Her eyes were sharp, desperate, and pleading. Under the cover of her frantic wiping, she pressed the folded white napkin flat against his palm. She squeezed his fingers around it, just once, hard. Gabriel's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed imperceptibly. He felt the coarse texture of the paper, the distinct hidden weight of a message. He closed his fist around it, sliding his hand smoothly into his lap. "Back off," Gabriel commanded, his voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer authority in it stopped Dante dead in his tracks. Gabriel looked at Victor, his face an unreadable mask of annoyance. "It's just coffee, Victor. Call your dog off." "I apologize, Gabriel. The staff here is usually exceptional," Victor said, his eyes darting to the shattered cup on the floor. His assassination plot had literally just washed out onto the marble. He was trying to calculate his next move. Gabriel pulled a clean handkerchief from his breast pocket and casually dabbed at his neck. As he did, he glanced down at his lap. Using his thumb, he flipped open the folded napkin under the table, shielding it from Victor's line of sight. It took him exactly 2 seconds to read the messy, bleeding ink. "Poison in cup. Exits blocked by Victor's men. Valet is compromised. Do not react." Gabriel Samuel was a man who had survived assassins in Dubai, ambushes in Sicily, and corporate warfare in Manhattan. He had an unparalleled ability to process information and adapt instantly. He didn't look at Selina, who was now standing, trembling, clutching her empty tray. He didn't look at his bodyguards. He looked at Victor. And for the first time that night, Gabriel smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile that did not reach his eyes. "You know, Victor," Gabriel said smoothly, leaning back against the leather booth, "I think you're right. 60% is steep. Perhaps we should renegotiate." The air in the VIP alcove grew incredibly still. Victor, sensing a sudden shift in Gabriel's demeanor, forced a laugh. "I'm glad you see reason, Gabriel. Let me get you a fresh drink and perhaps a towel for that suit." "Don't bother," Gabriel replied. He tapped his index finger twice against the wooden table. It was a rhythmic, almost silent tap. To the untrained eye, it meant nothing. To Carter, standing at his right shoulder, it was a thunderclap. It was code black, immediate extraction, hostile environment. "Actually, Victor, I've suddenly lost my appetite for this deal," Gabriel said, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet register. "In fact, I find the hospitality here toxic." Victor's eyes widened slightly. He knew. "Dante!" Victor started to shout, dropping the facade. Before the word fully left Victor's mouth, all hell broke loose. Carter moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed the heavy marble table by the edge and flipped it violently upward, launching it directly into Victor and Dante. The table crashed into them, pinning Victor against the back of the booth. Simultaneously, Gabriel's other 3 bodyguards drew suppressed sleek black firearms from their jackets. They didn't shout warnings, they simply acquired targets. Pft, pft, pft. 3 suppressed shots rang out, barely louder than a hand clap, but the impact was devastating. 2 of Dante's men, who had been reaching for their waistbands near the bar, dropped to the floor, blood pooling on the pristine tiles. The club erupted into pure pandemonium. Patrons screamed, diving under tables and scrambling toward the front door. Glasses shattered as chairs were knocked over. Gabriel rose from the booth, his eyes sweeping the room. He didn't draw a weapon, he let his men do the clearing. He looked down at the shattered espresso cup. The poison. If he had taken a single sip, he would be convulsing on the floor right now. He owed his life to the trembling waitress, currently cowering behind the barista station. Carter, back exit is compromised. Valet is burned. We go through the kitchens to the service alley, Gabriel ordered, his voice cutting clearly through the screams. Copy that. Moving, Carter barked, laying down suppressing fire toward the front entrance where Victor's backup men were now flooding in. Gunfire erupted, loud, unsuppressed, deafening roars from the newly arrived mobsters. Selina was huddled on the floor behind the espresso machine, her hands clamped over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. Wood splintered above her head as a stray bullet tore through the bar counter. She was going to die. She had ruined Victor's plan, and now she was caught in the crossfire of a mafia war. Suddenly, a massive hand grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet with shocking force. Selina shrieked, thrashing blindly. "No, let me go." "Stop fighting, damn it," a deep voice ordered. She opened her eyes. It was Gabriel. The Sheikh himself was holding her arm, his dark eyes blazing with an intense, calculating fire. "You stay here. Victor kills you before the police even arrive," Gabriel stated bluntly, pulling her flush against his side as another volley of bullets shattered the mirror behind the bar. "You're coming with me." Before she could process the statement, Gabriel was moving, dragging her along. They moved in a diamond formation, his bodyguards shielding them. They pushed through the swinging double doors into the industrial kitchen. Chefs and dishwashers were already fleeing out the side doors. Carter kicked open the heavy metal exit door leading to the back alley. The cold October rain hit them instantly. "2 men in the alley," one of the bodyguards shouted. Gunfire flashed in the darkness. Selina squeezed her eyes shut, stumbling blindly as Gabriel practically carried her through the wet alleyway. The smell of cordite and garbage mixed in the heavy air. "Clear," Carter yelled. At the end of the alley, a massive armored Mercedes Maybach was idling, its headlights off. Gabriel's secondary extraction team. Gabriel threw the rear door open and shoved Selina inside before diving in after her. Carter jumped into the front passenger seat, slamming his fist against the dashboard. "Drive! Go! Go! Go!" Carter roared. The heavy tires screeched against the wet asphalt as the Maybach tore out of the alley, merging violently into the chaotic New York traffic, leaving the blazing gunfight at L'Etoile far behind. Inside the soundproof cabin of the Maybach, the sudden silence was deafening. The only sound was the heavy, synchronized breathing of the occupants and the rhythmic thumping of the rain against the bulletproof glass. Selina was pushed back against the plush leather seats, her whole body trembling violently. Her neat uniform was torn, her knees were bruised, and she was soaked from the rain. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. She had just betrayed the most dangerous crime family in New York, and now she was trapped in a moving fortress with a man who was rumored to be even worse. Gabriel sat next to her. He was remarkably calm, casually adjusting the cuffs of his ruined shirt. He didn't look like a man who had just narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. He looked like a CEO who had just wrapped up a slightly annoying board meeting. He slowly turned his head to look at her. The interior streetlights flashed across his face, highlighting the sharp, predatory lines of his jaw. "Carter," Gabriel said quietly, not breaking eye contact with Selina. "Yeah, boss?" "Send a team to secure Victor Moretti's warehouses, all of them, tonight. If he wanted a war, he just got one." "Done." Gabriel finally shifted his full attention to Selina. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled, coffee-stained napkin. He smoothed it out on the center console. You took a massive risk, miss. J. Jenkins, Selina stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Selina. Selina, Gabriel repeated, the name rolling smoothly off his tongue. He leaned in slightly, his dark eyes analyzing every inch of her terrified face. Victor Moretti owned your debt. That's why you were there. Am I right? Selina nodded, a single tear escaping and tracking through the dust on her cheek. My father, he owed them. Victor forced me to work there. Gabriel's expression softened, just a fraction, but the underlying danger remained. You saved my life tonight, Selina, and in doing so, you just put a target on your own back that will never wash off. Victor knows you tipped me off. You can't go home. You can't go to the police. You belong to the underworld now. Selina let out a choked sob, burying her face in her hands. I didn't want you to die. I didn't want to be a murderer. Suddenly, she felt a warm, strong hand gently grasp her wrist, pulling her hands away from her face. Gabriel was looking at her, and the coldness in his eyes had been replaced by something fiercely protective. You aren't a murderer, Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a low, comforting rumble that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. You are a survivor, and you just bought yourself the most powerful ally in this city. He let go of her wrist, leaning back into the shadows of the luxury car. Victor Moretti thinks he can steal my empire, Gabriel whispered, looking out the window at the blurred city lights. By the time the sun comes up, he won't even have a grave. And as for you, Selina Jenkins, your debt is paid. But your life with me has just begun. The Maybach sped into the dark night, carrying Selina away from the only miserable life she knew and plunging her straight into the heart of a mafia king's empire. The armored Maybach did not stop until it descended 3 levels below the glittering pavement of Hudson Yards. The transition from the chaotic, rain-slicked streets of Manhattan to the sterile, hyper-secured subterranean garage was jarring. As the heavy steel garage doors locked into place behind them, with a definitive, echoing thud, Selina Jenkins finally let out the breath she felt she had been holding since she dropped that espresso cup. Gabriel Samuel stepped out of the vehicle first, his ruined charcoal suit jacket draped over one arm. The subterranean level was swarming with men who looked exactly like Carter. Broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed professionals wearing earpieces and bespoke suits that bulked slightly around the ribcage. This wasn't a mob hideout. This was the nerve center of a highly sophisticated paramilitary corporate empire. Carter opened Selina's door. She hesitated, her bruised knees trembling as she stepped onto the polished concrete. She felt incredibly small in her torn, damp L'Etoile uniform. Bring her up to the residential wing. Have Dr. Harrison clear her, Gabriel ordered, not looking back as he strode toward a bank of private biometric locked elevators. Then, lock down the perimeter. Nobody gets within a 3-block radius without my authorization. If Victor Moretti so much as sneezes in this zip code, I want to know about it. Yes, sir, Carter replied. He gently but firmly placed a hand on Selina's shoulder, guiding her forward. This way, Miss Jenkins. They entered a glass-walled elevator that shot upward at a dizzying speed, bypassing dozens of commercial floors before slowing down near the top of the skyscraper. When the doors slid open, Selina stepped into a world of incomprehensible wealth. Gabriel's penthouse spanned the entire top 3 floors of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree panoramic view of the New York City skyline, the rain lashing against the reinforced glass. The interior was a masterpiece of cold, modern elegance. Dark slate floors, walls paneled in imported Italian walnut, and minimalist furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But amidst the luxury, the reality of Gabriel's life was obvious. There were tactical monitors recessed into the walls and a state-of-the-art armory visible through a frosted glass door down the hall. A silver-haired man holding a medical bag was already waiting in a sprawling guest suite. Dr. Harrison was polite, efficient, and clearly accustomed to the bizarre hours and traumatic circumstances of Gabriel Samuel's life. He checked Selina for a concussion, treated the nasty scrape on her knee from her deliberate fall, and handed her a mild sedative. You're in mild shock, Miss Jenkins, Dr. Harrison said kindly, packing up his stethoscope. Your heart rate is elevated, and your adrenal glands are working overtime. Take the pill. Sleep. You are perfectly safe here. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. After the doctor left, Selina stood alone in the massive guest suite. A pristine set of folded clothes had been left on the edge of the California king bed. A pair of impossibly soft Loro Piana cashmere sweatpants and a simple, oversized white cotton shirt. She peeled off her damp, trauma-stained uniform, stepped into a scalding hot shower in the marble ensuite bathroom, and scrubbed until her skin was raw, trying to wash away the smell of cordite, cheap club cologne, and sheer terror. When she emerged, dressed in the borrowed clothes, Gabriel was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of her room, staring out at the city below. He had changed into a black turtleneck and dark trousers, looking less like a CEO and more like the ruthless shadow broker the underworld whispered about. He held a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. Selina froze in the doorway, clutching a towel to her damp hair. "I didn't mean to intrude," Gabriel said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet room. "I needed to make sure you were actually resting." "It's your house," Selina replied quietly, stepping further into the room. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Mr. Samuel." "Gabriel," he corrected, turning to face her. The city lights cast harsh shadows across his sharp cheekbones. "You saved my life. I think we can dispense with the formalities." "Gabriel," she tested the name. It felt heavy, dangerous. "What happens now? Victor knows I betrayed him. He knows I live in a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens. He knows everything about me." Gabriel took a slow sip of his drink. "Your apartment in Queens is currently being emptied by my team. Your personal belongings, whatever is salvageable or sentimental, are being brought here. The lease has been terminated, and the landlord has been generously compensated to forget you ever lived there." Selina's eyes widened. You erased my life?" "I secured it," Gabriel corrected smoothly, stepping toward her. The sheer physical presence of the man was overwhelming. "Victor Moretti sent a hit squad to your building 20 minutes ago. They kicked in the door of an empty apartment. If I hadn't pulled you out of that alley, you would be dead right now, Selina." The blunt, horrifying truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly, but Gabriel closed the distance in an instant, his free hand catching her elbow to steady her. His grip was strong, warm, and surprisingly gentle. "I'm trapped," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I traded one monster for another." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He looked down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "I am not Victor Moretti. I don't enslave people to pay off the debts of dead men, but I am not a saint either. We are at war, Selina, and until Victor is a memory, you stay here, under my protection. Do you understand?" Selina looked up into his eyes. Behind the cold, calculating exterior, she saw a flicker of genuine exhaustion, perhaps even a strange kind of honor. She nodded slowly. "Good," Gabriel said softly. He released her arm, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, the real work begins." By the time Selina woke up the next morning, the world had already caught fire. She walked out of the guest suite, her bare feet silent against the cold slate floors, and found the penthouse transformed. The sprawling living area had been converted into a makeshift command center. Half a dozen men in rolled-up sleeves and shoulder holsters were manning laptops and satellite phones. On the massive flat-screen televisions mounted on the far wall, local news stations, NY1 and Bloomberg, were broadcasting breaking reports. A massive four-alarm blaze broke out early this morning at a commercial shipping warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. A polished news anchor reported, looking grave. Authorities suspect a gas leak, though the sheer scale of the explosion has prompted an investigation by federal authorities. Meanwhile, in Staten Island, a sanitation processing plant owned by the Moretti family conglomerate was completely gutted by fire overnight. Selina swallowed hard. Gas leaks, electrical fires. It was Gabriel. He had struck back with devastating, systematic precision while she slept. Gabriel was standing at the head of a massive mahogany dining table, leaning over a series of blueprints and digital tablets. He looked up as Selina entered the room, the sharp lines of his face softening almost imperceptibly. "Carter, give us the room," Gabriel ordered. The men didn't hesitate. Within seconds, laptops were snapped shut, and the security team filtered out into the hallway, leaving Gabriel and Selena alone in the cavernous space. The only sound was the muted chatter of the news anchors on the muted televisions. "You've been busy," Selena noted, gesturing toward the screens. "Victor tried to cut off the head of the snake. I am systematically burning his body to the ground," Gabriel said matter-of-factly. He walked over to a high-end espresso machine on the kitchen island, a gleaming chrome contraption that looked vastly more expensive than the one she used at L'Étoile. He began pulling 2 shots. "Do you drink coffee, or is it purely a weapon for you?" A small, breathless laugh escaped Selena's lips. It felt strange to laugh, given the circumstances. "Black is fine, thank you." He handed her a delicate porcelain cup and leaned against the counter, studying her. "My men spent the night tearing apart Victor's supply lines. We've crippled his distribution, but taking his territory isn't enough. I need to dismantle his network completely so he has nowhere to hide. To do that, I need his ledgers." Selena blew gently on her coffee. "His accounting? Surely a man like Victor keeps everything encrypted on offshore servers." "That's what my cyber team thought." Gabriel frowned, rubbing the bridge of his nose in frustration. "We spent millions hacking into his shell companies in the Caymans and Cyprus. Nothing, just dummy accounts. Victor is old school, paranoid, and technically illiterate. He doesn't trust the cloud. He trusts paper." Selena froze, the coffee cup hovering inches from her lips. A memory surfaced, a fragmented, exhausting memory from a double shift at L'Étoile 3 months ago. She had been assigned to deep clean the private wine cellar in the basement, a sprawling catacomb holding millions of dollars in vintage alcohol. Victor and Dante had come down, thinking the room was empty. Selena had hidden behind a massive oak cask, terrified of being caught eavesdropping. She had watched Dante remove 5 dusty bottles of Chateau Margaux from a specific rack, press a hidden mechanism, and slide the entire wooden panel aside to reveal a heavy biometric wall safe. "He keeps them in the club," Selena blurted out, her voice loud in the quiet room. Gabriel straightened up, his eyes narrowing, instantly locking onto her with laser focus. "What did you say?" "Victor's ledgers, his physical books." Selena set the coffee cup down on the counter, her hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. "He doesn't keep them at his house or in a bank vault. He keeps them at L'Étoile, in the basement wine cellar." Gabriel walked toward her, closing the distance until he was standing mere inches away. She could smell the faint scent of bergamot and the rich aroma of the coffee on his breath. "Selena, look at me," Gabriel commanded softly. "Are you absolutely sure about this? My men tossed the club last night after the shootout. They didn't find a safe." "They wouldn't have," she insisted, looking up into his dark, intense eyes. "It's behind a false wall. You have to remove specific bottles of Chateau Margaux from the south wall rack to trigger the release mechanism." "But—" she hesitated, biting her lower lip. "But what?" Gabriel pressed, leaning in closer. "It's a biometric and dual-key safe. I saw Dante use Victor's thumbprint on a glass lifted from the bar, but he still needed a physical key. I heard Victor complaining about it. He said he was a fool for setting it up as a dual custody lock." Selena looked at Gabriel, the pieces clicking together in her mind. "Victor doesn't carry the physical key. He said he gave it to Callie." Gabriel let out a low, sharp breath, running a hand through his dark hair. "Callie Moretti, his estranged wife. They hate each other." Selena nodded. "Victor practically imprisoned her in that brownstone on the Upper East Side after he caught her trying to leave him. He uses her as a human vault because he knows she's too terrified of him to ever open it herself, and nobody in the underworld would dare approach her." Gabriel looked at Selena, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It wasn't the cold, terrifying smile he had given Victor the night before. This was a look of profound, genuine admiration. "You spent 3 years serving drinks to monsters, and you paid attention to every single detail," Gabriel murmured, his voice dropping an octave. He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing her cheek. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of heat straight to her core. "You aren't just a waitress, Selena Jenkins. You're a spy." Selina's breath hitched at his touch. She had spent years trying to be invisible, shrinking into the background so men like Victor wouldn't notice her. But Gabriel saw her. He saw all of her, and instead of exploiting her weakness, he was weaponizing her intelligence. "We need that key," Gabriel said, stepping back slightly, though his eyes never left hers. "Callie's brownstone is heavily guarded by Victor's most loyal men. A direct assault would be a bloodbath, and Victor would destroy the ledgers the second he heard we were moving on his wife." "So how do we get it?" Selina asked, her heart pounding. Gabriel turned toward the blueprints on the table, his mind already formulating a tactical strike. "We don't break in. We walk in. Callie is hosting a private charity luncheon tomorrow afternoon for the high society elite. Victor forces her to maintain public appearances. The security will be tight against heavily armed men." Gabriel paused, turning back to look at Selina. He looked her up and down, evaluating her not as a victim, but as an asset. "But they won't be looking for a new catering assistant," Gabriel finished, his eyes gleaming with dangerous intent. "Selina, how would you like to spill some more coffee?" The infiltration of Callie Moretti's Upper East Side brownstone required surgical precision. Gabriel did not rely on brute force when deception was an option, and Selina was about to become the sharpest instrument in his arsenal. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Gabriel's penthouse had transformed into a tactical staging ground. Selina sat at the mahogany dining table as Carter briefed her, sliding a sleek encrypted earpiece across the polished wood. The extraction plan, the disguise, Selina would embed with Balthazar Prestige Catering, a legitimate high society vendor Gabriel had quietly acquired overnight. The objective: locate the physical safe key. Intel suggested Callie wore it disguised as a piece of custom jewelry, a vintage Cartier Panther pendant on a heavy platinum chain. The window: Selina had exactly 4 minutes during the champagne service to isolate Callie, secure the key, and swap it with a perfectly weighted replica. The exit: once the swap was confirmed, Gabriel's cyber team would trigger a localized brownout on the block, disabling the security cameras long enough for Selina to slip out the service entrance. "You don't have to do this," Gabriel said, his voice cutting through the hum of the command center. He stood by the window, his dark eyes fixed on her. The bespoke navy suit he wore today only amplified his imposing presence. "I can send an operative. Carter's team can breach the perimeter. And Victor will execute her the second he hears gunfire," Selina replied, her voice remarkably steady. She looked down at the crisp white catering uniform they had provided. "Callie is a prisoner in that marriage, just like I was a prisoner at the club. She won't hand it over to a mercenary, but she might hand it over to a ghost." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He walked over, resting his hands on the back of her chair. The heat radiating from him was a grounding force against the icy terror pooling in her stomach. "If anything goes wrong, if a single guard looks at you twice, you say the word eclipse into comms, and we tear that brownstone down to the foundation to get you out." "Understood?" "Understood," Selina whispered. 4 hours later, Selina was carrying a silver tray of Dom Perignon flutes through the opulent, aggressively floral-scented foyer of the Moretti brownstone. The luncheon was a sea of pastel designer dresses and forced laughter. Victor's guards, dressed in cheap suits, attempting to look like private security, loitered near the exits with obvious bulging waistbands. Selina kept her head down, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Target acquired." 12 o'clock, Gabriel's low voice crackled in her earpiece, broadcasting from the mobile command center parked 2 blocks away. Selina looked up. Callie Moretti stood near the grand fireplace. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but terrifyingly thin, her eyes hollow and darting nervously around the room. Resting against her collarbone, glittering under the chandelier, was the heavy Cartier Panther pendant. It was time to spill another drink. Selina navigated the crowd, moving with deliberate, practiced grace. As she approached Callie, a wealthy socialite stepped backward. Selina seized the microsecond opportunity. She didn't trip this time. She expertly tilted the silver tray just enough to send 2 full crystal flutes cascading down the front of Callie's pale silk dress. Gasps erupted around the room. "Oh my God, I am so incredibly sorry, Mrs. Moretti." Selina gasped, immediately pulling linen napkins from her apron. "Please, let me help you." Two of Victor's guards instantly surged forward, their hands hovering near their jackets. "Back off," Callie snapped at the guards, her voice brittle with humiliation and suppressed rage. She glared at Selina. "You clumsy idiot. Come to the powder room and help me clean this up before the silk stains." "Perfect execution," Gabriel murmured in her ear. "You have 4 minutes." Selina followed Callie down a quiet, marble-lined hallway and into a lavish guest bathroom. The moment the heavy door clicked shut, the older woman's furious facade dropped. She leaned against the marble vanity, burying her face in her hands with a shuddering sigh. "I can't do this anymore," Callie whispered to herself. Selina locked the door. She reached into her apron, bypassing the napkins, and pulled out a small encrypted burner phone and the forged Cartier replica. "Mrs. Moretti," Selina said softly, her voice devoid of the panicked waitress persona. Callie looked up, her tear-streaked eyes widening as she noticed Selina's calm, calculated demeanor. "Who are you?" "My name is Selina. I worked at L'Étoile. Victor tried to use me to poison Gabriel Samuel 2 nights ago." Callie gasped, instinctively taking a step back. "Samuel? You're the one who survived the shootout. Victor's men are turning the city upside down looking for you." "Gabriel Samuel is protecting me," Selina stated, taking a step forward. "And he can protect you too. But we need to destroy Victor's empire to do it. We need the ledgers in the wine cellar." Selina pointed to the necklace. "We need the key." Callie's hand flew to the platinum panther at her throat. "If Victor finds out I gave this to you, he will kill me. He promised he would." "He's going to kill you eventually anyway, Callie. You know that," Selina said, her voice laced with the empathy of shared trauma. She slid the burner phone across the marble vanity. "This phone has a single contact. Gabriel's extraction team. Give me the key. Tonight, when Victor leaves to inspect the damage to his warehouses, you walk out the back door and get into the black SUV waiting in the alley. You disappear, fully funded, with a new identity. Gabriel honors his deals." Callie stared at the phone, then at Selina. The silence in the bathroom was deafening, broken only by the steady ticking of a gold clock on the wall. "Selina, 60 seconds, Carter's voice warned in her ear. With trembling hands, Callie reached behind her neck. She unclasped the authentic Cartier chain and handed it to Selina. The metal was warm against Selina's palm. In return, Selina handed over the replica, which Callie quickly fastened around her own neck. "Tell Samuel he better not miss," Callie whispered, her eyes hardening with sudden fierce resolve. "He never does," Selina promised. Selina slipped the real key into her apron, unlocked the door, and walked out. 30 seconds later, the lights in the brownstone flickered and died. In the ensuing confusion of the orchestrated brownout, Selina slipped through the kitchen service doors and vanished into the bustling Manhattan streets. The smell of smoke still hung heavy in the air around Tribeca when the armored Maybach pulled up to the rear service alley of L'Étoile. The front of the club was a crime scene, cordoned off by yellow police tape, but the rear entrance had been quietly secured by Gabriel's operatives. Gabriel stepped out of the vehicle, retrieving a suppressed tactical Glock from a locked compartment in the door. He turned to Selina, who was sitting in the back seat, clutching a heavy biometric cloning device they had sourced from the black market. "You stay in the car with Carter," Gabriel ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "My men and I will breach the basement. You guide us to the false wall via the comms." "Gabriel, no," Selina argued, stepping out of the vehicle into the damp night air. "You don't know the exact sequence of the bottles. If you pull the wrong vintage of the Chateau Margaux, it triggers a localized lockdown. Steel shutters drop over the doors. You'll be trapped down there." Gabriel stared at her, the streetlights reflecting in his dark, assessing eyes. He hated exposing her to danger, but he trusted her intellect more than his own ego. He gave a curt nod. "You stay behind me. Always." The infiltration was silent. They bypassed the ruined kitchen and descended the stone spiral staircase into the subterranean wine cellar. The air was frigid, smelling of damp earth and shattered glass. Flashlight beams sliced through the darkness, illuminating the millions of dollars of wine still sitting untouched on the racks. Selina moved swiftly to the south wall, her heart hammered wildly, but her hands were steady. She remembered the exact layout. 3rd row from the bottom, The 1982 vintages, Selina whispered, pointing to a dusty cluster of bottles. Pull the second one, then the fifth, then push the fourth one inward. Gabriel executed the sequence flawlessly. A heavy pneumatic hiss echoed through the cellar. The massive oak shelving unit shuddered, then slowly swung outward, revealing a reinforced steel vault door. In the center of the door was a digital thumbprint scanner, and beneath it a physical keyhole. "Brilliant," Gabriel muttered. He pulled a small silicone mold from his jacket, a perfect copy of Victor's thumbprint lifted from a whiskey glass at a parley weeks ago. He pressed it against the scanner. Beep, green light. Gabriel then pulled the Cartier key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. He turned it. A heavy metallic clank signaled the release of the deadbolts. Gabriel pulled the heavy door open. Inside, sitting on a single metal shelf, were 3 thick, leather-bound ledgers, the complete, unencrypted financial ruin of the Moretti crime family. "We have them," Gabriel said, a triumphant edge to his voice. He reached for the books. "Don't touch them," a voice barked from the darkness of the cellar. Floodlights suddenly blazed to life, blinding them. Selina threw her hands up, squinting against the harsh glare. Standing at the base of the spiral staircase was Victor Moretti. His silver hair was disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled, and his eyes were wild with desperation. He was flanked by 4 heavily armed men with their weapons trained directly on Gabriel and Selina. "I knew you'd come for the books, Samuel," Victor spat, gripping a heavy revolver. "You burned my warehouses, you stole my wife, but you are not taking my legacy." Gabriel didn't flinch. He slowly lowered his hands, stepping slightly in front of Selina to shield her body with his own. "Your legacy is over, Victor. Callie is gone. Your distribution is ash. Even if you shoot me, my men will release these ledgers to the FBI, the IRS, and the 5 families within the hour. You are a dead man walking." Victor let out a ragged, unhinged laugh. "Maybe. But I'll have the satisfaction of putting a bullet between the eyes of the little waitress who ruined my life." Victor shifted his aim directly at Selina's chest. His finger tightened on the trigger. Time seemed to slow down. Selina froze, staring down the black barrel of the gun. She expected to feel fear, but all she felt was a strange, serene acceptance. She had fought back. She had mattered. But Gabriel Samuel was not a man who allowed what was his to be taken. With reflexes honed by a lifetime of violence, Gabriel didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he kicked the heavy steel vault door with all his strength, slamming it outward. The heavy metal caught the reflection of the floodlights, creating a split-second blinding flash. Simultaneously, Gabriel lunged backward, tackling Selina to the cold stone floor just as Victor's revolver roared. The bullet shattered a bottle of 1945 Romanée Conti inches above their heads, raining red wine down on them like blood. Before Victor could fire a second shot, the shadows behind him erupted. Carter and the secondary extraction team, who had silently breached the cellar through a hidden ventilation shaft Gabriel had discovered on the club's blueprints, opened fire. The suppressed weapons hissed. Victor's men dropped instantly, their bodies hitting the stone floor with heavy thuds. Victor staggered backward, hit in the shoulder. He dropped his gun, clutching his bleeding arm, his face twisted in agony and disbelief. He looked up at the catwalk above the wine racks, where Carter stood with a smoking rifle. Gabriel rose slowly from the floor, pulling Selina up with him. He checked her quickly, his eyes frantically scanning her for injuries. When he saw she was unharmed, the panic in his eyes dissolved into pure, lethal rage. He walked over to Victor, who was now on his knees, gasping for air. Gabriel picked up the 3 leather ledgers from the vault. "You could have just taken the 60%, Victor," Gabriel said coldly. He didn't shoot him. Death was too easy. Gabriel pulled a zip tie from his pocket, tossing it to Carter, who had descended the stairs. "Bind him. Leave him for the feds. An anonymous tip to the bureau should suffice. Let him rot in a supermax prison, knowing a waitress and a ghost dismantled his entire life." Gabriel turned his back on the ruined mob boss. He walked over to Selina, his expression softening as he looked at her wine-stained clothes and shaking hands. He took off his bespoke suit jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. The warmth of his body heat and the scent of bergamot enveloped her. "It's over," Gabriel said softly, his hand resting securely on the small of her back. Your debt is erased. You are truly free. Selena looked up at him, her heart finally steadying. She had survived the crossfire of kings, and in doing so, she had found her own power. I don't think I want to be entirely free of you, Gabriel, she admitted, a small, daring smile playing on her lips. Gabriel's eyes darkened with a possessive, consuming warmth. He pulled her close, the chaos of the ruined cellar fading away as his lips brushed against her forehead. Good, because I'm never letting you go. If you enjoyed this thrilling dive into the underworld, where loyalty is tested, secrets are currency, and a single spilled cup of coffee can change the fate of a billionaire's empire, you won't want to miss what comes next. This story proves that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's intelligence, courage, and perfect timing. Selena went from a trapped waitress to the queen of a shadow empire, but the criminal underworld is never quiet for long.